What if the Gihon Spring is in Salt Lake City, Utah? If you've been following me, you know that Salt Lake City is the true Jerusalem, in which case, of course, the Gihon would be there as well. One of my followers was asking me about this recently, so I thought it would be a good time to make a little video on it. So they're wondering about the tunnel of Hezekiah, how he made the stone waterway to bring water from the Gihon Spring into Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, they have this big tour you can take of Hezekiah's tunnel and the pool underneath. Um, and so it's kind of a well known aspect of scripture because of this well known landmark. The biblical account of Hezekiah's tunnel is much shorter than most people realize, I think, because, well, the tunnel itself has become pretty famous. The Bible provides only a few passages describing the project, and many of the commonly repeated details come from later archaeology rather from scripture itself. And if there is one thing this process of mapping scripture has taught me, is that scripture is shockingly accurate, at least when it comes to locations. It's actually been a huge faith builder for me because it's made me realize if scripture is this accurate about locations, what else is it accurate about? And I struggled in the past to, understand how scripture could be trusted if it's been so manipulated and controlled and changed, which is still true. But if you take the time to really sift through all of that, it does come together and it is very accurate. So I believe these are the main scriptures on Hezekiah's tunnel. There may be a few other ones. If I'm missing any significant ones, please let me know. But basically, the story begins during the reign of King Hezekiah when the Assyrian king threatened Jerusalem. And in 2 Chronicles 32, Hezekiah recognized the danger of this, and he took counsel with his leaders to stop up the waters of the fountains or the water outside of the city. And the purpose for this was so that if the Assyrians attacked Jerusalem, they wouldn't find all this abundant water available. And I guess make Jerusalem less valuable. That's the assumption I'm coming to, at least when I'm reading the story. But it reads, "There was gathered much people together, who stopped all the fountains and the brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water?" Then in 2 Chronicles 32:30, it reads, "The same Hezekiah also stopped the upper watercourse of Gihon and brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David," referencing in this case Jerusalem. And in the Geneva Bible, it actually says it took the water underneath to the west side of the city, which is quite literally what we are seeing with City Creek, as I'm going to show you in a little bit. Now, I do want to take a moment and clarify this Gihon Spring or Gihon Brook is different than the Gihon River, which is one of the 4 rivers of Eden talked about in Genesis and elsewhere. I know that confused me at first, so I did want to mention that. Okay, so that verse we just read, it establishes 4 basic things. One, that, the water source was a Gihon. The Gihon had an upper water course, and then Hezekiah stopped or diverted that water course, and that water that he diverted was brought to the west side of the city. The Bible doesn't really say how long the tunnel was or where it began or where it ended, or the exact route it followed. Although, if I remember traditionally in the Middle East, the source is east of the city, if I'm remembering correctly, which is interesting because you'll see in a little bit that the source in Salt Lake is also east. Another key passage is in 2 Kings 20:20. It says, "The rest of the acts of Hezekiah and all his might, and how he made a pool and a conduit and brought water into the city." So this verse confirms that he constructed both a pool and a conduit and successfully brought water into Jerusalem. However, neither the pool or the conduit is named. So there's a scripture in Isaiah that also seems to be referring to the same project. Although again, it doesn't clarify, but it does seem to be talking about the same thing. So Isaiah 22:9-11, it says, "You've seen also the breaches of the city of David, that they are many, and you've gathered together the waters of the lower pool. You made it into a ditch between the two walls for the water of the old pool." Now, I want to say really quickly, I encourage you to go to my friend Pam's channel. She is Seer of the Times. She was actually just live on site at what we believe is the Gihon in Salt Lake City, and walking around and showing how the creek divides and goes underwater and all of that. So I'm going to show you all of this on the map in just a moment. But if you want to see live footage of what it looks like, go check out her channel. Interestingly enough, what the more detailed description actually comes from the Apocrypha. In Sirach 48:17, it says, "Hezekiah fortified his city and brought in water into the midst thereof. He digged the hard rock with iron and made wells for water." So this verse provides details that aren't really found anywhere else. It says that he brought the water into the city and dug through hard rock using iron tools and created these waterways, right? It's the closest thing in scripture really to description of the actual construction. I also want to point out the part about the walls that were in the ditch dug between the walls that was mentioned in the previous scripture. It really does seem to fit the area that Pam was showing in her video of downtown Salt Lake, right around the temple, because there are still remains of walls there, and that's where this water ran. So when I was watching that, I was thinking about that scripture and thinking how easily that could fit. Okay, now that we have clarified what scripture does and does not say, let's go ahead and jump over to the maps. And the Jordan River is this blue line that runs between. Okay, so if we are in Salt Lake City, we come down here. So this is the temple. This is the LDS temple in Salt Lake City right here. And I do believe this is the location of the original temple on Temple Mount. This would be Mount Moriah. And I've talked about that in other videos. But anyway, so this blue line, there's these two blue lines here. This is City Creek. It's called City Creek today. So I'm going to show you the headwaters of City Creek if we follow this blue line up here. All the way up here in the mountains. So you can see it is east of the city. Not that it says that in scripture, but that's what tradition says. So, the headwaters of City Creek are up here. It runs down this big canyon. And I've talked about this in other videos. So what I'm thinking now is, I do believe this is the Kidron Valley. This is City Creek Canyon, and this is the Kidron Valley. And I believe it probably extended a little further. It's been built up now and excavated and everything. And there are references to, the Kidron Brook. And I've wondered if they are one and the same, the Gihon and the Kidron Brook, or if the Gihon just runs in the Kidron Valley. Or maybe it's a totally different waterway that I haven't identified yet. But what I am thinking is that the Gihon ran through here. And then you can see it actually, this blue line should connect. It doesn't connect. It splits here. And one runs further down and then veers west and runs into the Jordan River. And then the other branch is redirected, exactly as scripture says, west of the city. So due west almost, all the way down again to the Jordan River right here. So that does fit the descriptions given in scripture. It was diverted and changed. Now what's very interesting about this is this creek is rather difficult to identify these days because it's been diverted into conduits and tunnels underground, quite literally. There are certain areas where City Creek actually runs through a mall. It goes underground and comes back up and out underneath and runs through Macy's in a mall. I'll try to post some images here. And it also runs right here on the north side of the temple, which actually fits some other scriptures that I'm failing to remember at the moment. That's in a different video somewhere. I'll have to try to pull that up. And so it is currently these days diverted. It's hidden underground. It goes under the ravines. And again, if you go watch my friend Pam's video, she's showing you can see where it goes underground and comes back up and goes underground again. Now in Mormon pioneer days, you can find a lot of information about how as soon as they arrived in the valley here, they used City Creek to irrigate, and they started irrigating the creek all through what later became Salt Lake City. So it's a highly used water source. So that's what I think. And there are so many underground tunnels and bizarre things going on here. It's highly probable there is an underground pool of some sort, as described, but I don't know because I'm not allowed to go down there. Nobody is, really. The other option I have wondered about is, it could have been one of these creeks. It could have been, I believe it's Red Butte. Yeah, Red Butte Creek runs through here. And it actually, I believe, this is the creek that empties into this body of water in Liberty Park. What is this called? I was looking into this a while ago. I remember wondering if that was the Pool of Siloam, but I don't really think so because those already run west. And if anything, they're actually south of the city. They're running south of the city and then west. So it really fits the description most that this was diverted. The water was stopped up and hidden. I mean, it was redirected underground and then redirected west. Let me pop up some images of City Creek today. Oh, also really quickly, this is a nice article that's talking about the irrigation of City Creek and the whole process they went through to redirect the water. It makes me wonder if maybe some of the aqueduct was already in place, or the remains of it, and they were kind of rebuilding it to keep the city from flooding. But if anyone's curious and wants to go check that article out, you can do that. The address is 7canionstrust.org. And then just for fun, here's a few images of where the Gihon now flows through Macy's. Right down the middle of that mall. I believe it's called City Creek Mall. All right, friends. Well, those are my thoughts thus far on the Gihon. I'm sure I'll have more to add to the topic down the road, but let me know what you think. Thanks so much. Bye.